And Michael is from Apollo. So Michael, without further ado, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. My name is Michael Watson. I lead developer relations at Apollo. And I'm really excited to talk with you about GraphOS, which is our SaaS offering, but also what I think it'd be really relevant and helpful for the Redwood JS community. Just real quick, one of the best ways if you want to get in touch with me or anything after this, we have our Discord community. You can feel free to ping me anytime at Watson. So let's talk maybe about the Apollo that you're familiar with. Apollo Client. It's one of our open source projects that's really been around for, I don't know, 6+ years. It's the default in new Redwood JS applications. We always have implemented the latest from React. We just put suspense integration into 3.8, local state management options, great cache with zero config. And the best thing, I think, it's proven at scale and has a very vibrant ecosystem. There's a great community around Apollo Client. Now, let's talk a little bit about GraphOS, which maybe this is the side of Apollo that you're not as familiar with. GraphOS is really about a management control plane for your GraphQL API and how everyone is consuming and contributing to that. One of the core pieces of that is our Apollo router technology, which is about routing across multiple GraphQL APIs. And we're going to talk about that more in just a second. There's way too many features here for us to just cover in this pitch of what's today. So if you want to check out more, I put the link into our platform docs that gets a little bit more into each one of these features. But I really want to focus on what I think would be helpful for this community today. So let's talk about the typical Redwood JS app, right? I love the developer experience that's behind it. You know, you have all your services kind of nicely, neatly wrapped up, contributing into this GraphQL API, and you have this mono repo that's part of it. But what I've seen that happen sometimes is as your project gets more successful, maybe you have a mobile team that starts up some mobile projects and they start consuming that same GraphQL endpoint. But maybe they don't want to use some of the same fields that you already have developed in there. And you start getting to this world where you kind of have different representations, one for the mobile, one for the web. And that might cause some friction over time. And as teams grow, the development process might slow down. And I've seen this is where, you know, the mobile teams might start creating their own backends that kind of gives the functionality of what they need, which causes a little bit of duplication. Now, this is kind of the growing point, and I'm setting this up for where the Apollo router might fit into the picture. So I could see a possible future with Redwood JS applications where they grow to a certain point where the Apollo router and Apollo Federation starts becoming part of the picture, where you really want to have those mobile teams essentially extending off of the Redwood JS app. That's kind of like the one source of truth. And then they can build, you know, maybe a little GraphQL API that has some flavors of representations that they want that's coming from that Redwood JS app. But like, let's be honest about this. You probably don't need the router today. And you probably ask, like, is GraphOS something I can even use? Yes, it is. And there's some specific features that I want to cover that I think would be really helpful for this community. So what I've done is I took the Redwood JS blog, just the starter project from the tutorial, hosted on Netlify. And what I have pulled up is just the graphical representation. GraphQL is one of the first playground GraphQL tools that was put out a long time ago. It's made a lot of progress. But one of the things we've built on our side is Apollo Explorer. And you don't need a GraphOS account or anything for this. What I have here on the screen is actually our Sandbox Explorer. So this is at our Studio Sandbox URL. And it gives a nice way for you to be able to create operation collections. There's a couple more things, like if you want to copy an operation to a curl to share with someone. You can also have headers. There's scripts you can create. A lot of flexibility in here. So this is just another option that's out there if you wanted to have something a little different from what GraphQL is providing you. Now, if you wanted to use this, there's one thing that you're going to need to do in your project. Now, here's that same project that I was talking about. All I've done is add in a CORS configuration that adds in the studio.apollographical.com URL. Once you've added that, everything with Sandbox will start working, and you could just use it just like I had on the screen. Now, if you want to take a step further into this, there's some great features, I think, inside of GraphOS that would be really helpful to the Redwood JS community. And we're going to actually jump into those right now. So one of the things that I've done is I've just started out a blank project. So when you sign up for GraphOS, this is kind of the getting started experience. What we can do is we can just add in our URL for our Netlify functions. We call whatever we want for the subgraph name. You can call it monolith Redwood JS. We just have one right here. This is kind of just the stuff we need to do to get through and create our first graph. Now, I've already created all this behind the scenes, so that's kind of all we need to do to get started. And this is what kind of looks like once everything's there. Now, when you do create a new project, it does provision a cloud router for you. I'd like you to think about it more as a developmental tool, not something that you're going to put into your infrastructure of your production at this point, right? You kind of already have all that set up. But that experience of being able to, for example, create an operation collection that has shared aspects, executing from inside of here, all our options. And I think one of the really cool things that would be an upgrade, you can actually create pre-flight scripts inside of Apollo Explorer. And one of the things that I think would be really helpful is the OAuth. So, there is a whole authentication story that's right through that tutorial. You can actually add in OAuth requests into here. It's something that I've actually done for an app I built with Spotify and their REST API. And it enables developers just to get that access token right away inside of here. Now, there's a lot more stuff that comes along with this, but I think the one feature that I would say is really valuable for Redwood JS community would be our Schema Linting feature. So we have this concept of checking, validating schemas, and there's a lot of stuff you can do in that, but I think the linter is one thing that would be really helpful. So in here, there's a lot of different options of what you can configure. Naming conventions, as people contribute into your project, maybe you want to make sure everything's camel case. And if someone doesn't use camel case, you want that to stop the PR. So we can have these errors that pop up inside of here. And integrating this into our app is just setting up a couple GitHub actions. So I have two GitHub actions I created. One is this schema check. All it does is it just kind of sets up the project. It runs the Redwood generate command. This is what generates that .graphql file in the .redwood file, .redwood folder, and has all of the information here. So we're basically using this schema in our CI pipelines to check everything. So let's just see how that works. So let's say I did something like this. That's terrible. Let me put the skip auth in here. And we have just a branch in GitHub. We're just going to commit that, push it up, and then we're going to create a pull request. So pretty straightforward. We're right just in our normal developer workflows. And you'll notice that this linting is what's actually starting off. You can see our Netlify deploy, kind of all of our nice things inside of here. What this is going to do is it's going to take that schema that's being generated in there. It's going to send it into GraphOS, and it's going to compare it to what was initially pushed into there and be able to tell us, is it breaking maybe client operations? Is it breaking some of our linting rules? Lots of things in there. Now, one thing I want to say, we call it schema validation, where we check this change against the operations that have run in your graph. Those are operations that are sent through the cloud router. Since we're not using the cloud router and what we're talking about right here, there are no operations to check against. But if you wanted to, for example, have a cron job that sends the operations from your client repo to GraphOS through that cloud router on some schedule, it would work inside of there. But look at this. We got that failure inside of here. And we can see that the test name was added and the field name should be camel case. And we can actually just click right into that URL and see that failure real time right inside of here. Right. So that's really what we want to have is on that pull request where we're adding that in. We want to be able to see that fail happen inside of there. So I think these are a couple of the features in GraphOS that you could use today. It's all free. You wouldn't have to pay anything. Don't need to put the router in front of your infrastructure, and you can start linting your schema and ensuring that all the contributions that are happening in your project all kind of follow the same naming conventions. And of course, if you need any other linting rules, feel free to ping us inside of our Discord channel. We would love to help out with that. Now, just coming back to the end of it, let's recap kind of the things you could do here, use today for free. One, Apollo Sandbox, no GraphOS account in there. We covered the schema linting. Along with that schema linting, there's things like the change log. There's a change log that tells you what are the differences that you've put in there. And I probably should have showed that real quick. That change log just gives you what are the changes that have happened inside of the schema with each one of those. And I have a GitHub action that publishes that schema in here on any change into main. And last, Redwood already talked about their conference. We actually have GraphQL Summit that's going to be coming up in October. I went ahead and put together a discount code for this community. So if you did want to learn more about GraphOS, GraphQL, Apollo, other GraphQL projects that are coming on, would love to see you there. And if there's anything I can do to help, feel free to ping me and talk to me at any time. With that, I think I'm just about at time. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak to the community and kind of show our stuff inside of here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm going to bring our panelists up. And Peter, what do you think? I'll go to you first.
Me? Oh, I think the linter is really
you
cool. I've always wanted.
sound a little bit like a robot.
Peter, you got robot voice.
Right,
You want me to hop in while Peter fixes robot
Yeah,
voice?
go for it, Ellen. Thank you.
Always a big fan of linters as someone who is perpetually not getting my syntax correct. One of the things I always think about with having it in CI, are you thinking at all about how to push it earlier in the process so you don't end up with, oh, I was ready to merge and now I have to go back and fix it and change again? How are you thinking through that?
Yeah. I think, one of the things with like the linting process is like you want to get as close to the developer's fingertips of where they can do that. So everything that was in that GitHub action is actually through our Rover CLI. And so it's commands that also developers can run in their workflows. Typically in my projects, I'll create a couple different scripts that will have the ability to run that linting like on the side. I think we always have ESLint, right, involved in all of our projects. This is another addition in that, right? It's not so much about just like the formatting and structure of it. It really gets into the specifics about how are we adding directives into our project. I think of the validation that happens in Redwood JS for like the directive on skip auth or requires auth. Similar to that, but now you're talking about all the pieces of your GraphQL syntax. So you really want to push that as close as you can to the developer's fingertips so they can do it as soon as possible. I never like making PRs until I know that stuff. Like I hate when a PR gets pushed back to me of like, oh, you have one test failing or you have some linting errors. And it's like, I should have checked that beforehand. So I like having that available before PRs as well.
Peter, we'll see how your robot voice is doing.
This is my normal voice. Okay, perfect.
Turned off the robots.
Yeah, I think the big feature that I loved there was linting. One thing that I wasn't 100% sure about, and I think you might have alluded to it, but maybe I misunderstood you, was that, say for instance, I remove a field of a resolver or I delete something that is actually actively in use. Is there a protection for that?
Yeah, there is. Now, one of the things about that, though, is all the metrics of GraphOS are all collected through that Apollo router. So inside of that project, there is the Explorer, where that's actually sending the traffic through a cloud router, then to your Redwood JS application. So for you to get that, all you would need to do is somehow send the operations from your Redwood JS app to the cloud router. I don't think for most of the projects here, it makes sense to put the router, in the middle of your website and, your back end of what's kind of already nicely coupled together. But you could have a cron job that takes all the operations from your GitHub repo, pushes those to the cloud router on, some interval, maybe on a daily basis or every other day. And then those operations would be part of that checks with schema validation. And it would do that static analysis against all those. So definitely an option. You just have to make sure those operations go through the cloud router for that to work.
That's super cool.
Okay, Michael, I've got so much to say, so I'm just going to say it all. It's going to go quick. So look, Meteor, huge influence on me. Meteor, definitely like Redwood is a spiritual successor to Meteor. Apollo comes out of Meteor project, lays the foundation for really the whole GraphQL ecosystem. Every time in the Redwood community we get to tap into an Apollo tool, it's like we feel like we're hitting the tip of the iceberg. The Apollo client using the cache is one of the favorite tools amongst all the startups I know. GraphOS looks amazing. I know, here's my comment. I know GraphQL has its things and its history, but thank you all for the foundation you've set for this ecosystem and the tooling. Like it's phenomenal. So, and I'm just going to pitch the conference. Gerald from Apollo is going to be coming to the conference and doing a workshop on day 0. If you all want to learn more about Apollo, you should definitely come to that. Michael, thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you so much.
We like you. We like you guys a lot. All right, I'm done.
Thank you.